right, let's get started. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized by Boneheads and PCC. I'm your host for today. My name is Alex Horst. I have been working for Autodesk for quite a number of years now. So I started with a 3ds DOS version a while ago and made my way all the way to 2017. So that's great. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, some new feature workflows on entertainment and design markets or industries, I should say. There's no specific theme to today's presentation, so take whatever you can benefit from. I've recorded or pre-recorded a bunch of videos. I do have 3ds Max open in the back of my presentation, so if there are questions, we can jump or revisit certain sections of this presentation. Please make sure you are aware of the chat. So hello, everyone. Hello, Sebastian. Hello, Alina. And yeah, just give me your questions in between. Give me feedback, please. I'll give my best to actually, read through what is happening there. And let me make my head a little bit smaller so I don't occlude the whole presentation. Hey, Lucas. And I'm not sure if I pronounce your names correctly. I'm very, very, very sorry. XYZ I can pronounce, so that's something. Awesome. So let's have a look at the agenda, shall we? So I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about non-destructive workflows, because whenever I talk to people who are switching software packages or coming from other packages, really, what makes 3ds Max a very strong modeling and animation package is its non-destructive workflows with the modifier stack. But there's so much more to it with the Max Creation Graph and Blended Box Map and basically stuff that we've added over the last couple of sometimes months, sometimes last 2 or 3 years. It's really something, right? So, and then there's the next bullet point, which is just handling about or talking about UVs or texturing, skinning, and animation as well. If we have time, I have a bunch of core information because I have the feeling that whenever we talk about 3ds Max, we don't do a necessarily good job at providing you with the ins and outs of what is happening behind the scenes. So sometimes it feels like, oh, there's no new feature for me, or I can't really benefit from the new version. But in fact, there's so much stuff like stability and performance changes happening under the hood that is at least interesting to know what has been happening. All right, so let's carry on. Non-destructive workflows, and I'll try to make this a little bit I don't know, as interactive as I can, as I said. So even though this is a PowerPoint, I'm aware that you took the time out of your day to join us, so I really appreciate that. So if you have specific questions, let me know in between, right? So non-destructive workflows is basically 4 different things that I'm going to talk about. The Max Creation Graph, the Datachannel Modifier, which for a lot of people out there, even though it is a new feature, but many people don't really understand what it is. So I have several examples on how you could benefit from using it. And then there are some tips and tricks on booleans and Blended Box Map as well. Cool. So if I can ask those who have logged into the chat, which version of 3ds Max you currently are using, that would be great to know. And maybe give me a yes and no if you ever use the Max Creation Graph, the MCG. That would be great. So let's see, I'm going to carry on. We got one 2017, that's great. Fantastic. So when we talk about the MCG, usually when I have a room of people, the people kind of have heard about it, but maybe there are 1 or 2 people, oh, you use it. That's perfect. There are just a few people in the room who ever touched on MCG. And then those who have touched on it have kind of stopped using it because it's a very steep learning curve, and it's not very it's not a very intuitive learning experience. So thank you. Oh, 2013, 2016, and 17, but no MCG, which is totally fine, by the way. So for those who want to use it and really get into it, 2018 might be a good version to start wrapping your head around it, because we have revamped the learning experience and are shipping more and more examples. In fact, when you click on those MCG nodes, you get a whole better like information tab, or basically yeah, it gives you a highlight of what the MCG node does, or basically a summary, as a sum up. Instead of describing an array by saying this is an array, it will actually tell you how to use it, how it's supposed to be used in MCG. So that's great. But most importantly, you got an undo and redo function. I guess that's right? That's a no-brainer, but it hasn't been there before. So when you work in these kind of node-based environments, you really want to be able to go back and forth. And then a lot of people who tried MCG, they said, well, you can do stuff with it. And there were people who created really amazing MCGs, but when you do something, you don't get live feedback. So this is what the live type is there for. So instead of creating an MCG, saving it, evaluating what it does, and then giving Deus Max gives you the notice that it's not working or something is broken, and it gives you like a node ID, node number 881 is incompatible or something. The live type will give you live feedback when you connect A to B to C, that maybe B to C is not, a good fit, right? And there's so much more, right? There you can read particles and so on. For those who are not that tech savvy or just don't have the time to deep dive into MCG, keep an eye open on scriptspot.com as well as on the Max Creation Graph Facebook group. There are more and more MCGs appearing, and you can basically download them for free, and you can open them up in order to see how they were being built. Is that a sentence even? I'm not sure. All right. So what I've done here, I've just did a quick video on some of the area blocks as well as the actual help file for the MCG, and you can see everything is basically revamped. This is the Max Creation Graph 2018 sample pack, which you can download. And also installing MCGs is a whole lot easier now. So basically, you can go into a folder, select multiple files at once and install them. You can also just drag and drop MCGs into 3ds Max and we'll install those, which is great. And then you can get started. So these are just some very quick examples here. For example, if you have existing geometry and you want to create an MCG out of that existing geometry, all you have to do is select it, go into the scripting menu, and here we can create a compound from mesh, right? So instead of making it a little bit counterintuitive on how you add geometry or ship geometry inside of an MCG, this is now a one-click workflow, and you can create a new procedural object of that. Like that shell that we just selected could have some sort of a noise control on it. So every time you drag that shell into the scene, it has a little bit of variation to it. Or in that case, we're just adding a scale modifier, right? And as soon as you save that, you will find that shell in your geometry list, depending on which category you put it in. So this is an MCG, and Max Creation Graph category has the scale modifier on it. And this is as simple as it gets when we talk about that kind of stuff. What's more interesting, or even more interesting, I should say, is things that we ship with the MCG sample pack, like a conform spline. So look at this. We got this spline up here, and we want to conform it laid down on the landscape below. So all we need to do is basically create that MCG object that we provide you with. You click the spline as well as the surface, and this creates a new spline which basically projects upon that surface in a specified direction. So you could also project that on a wall or something else. And then as soon as we have that, we can use it as, I don't know, like a path constraint or something like that. Beautiful. All right. So that is that. And of course, thinking about non-destructivity, you can go back into the original spline, change stuff there, change the geometry of the landscape even. Everything will update accordingly. All right. And here's another quick example, as this is a mixture of game and design workflows. I just wanted to show you a fence MCG that we ship with, and you can pick external geometry for for that fence, right? So you could have a geometry for the posts and for the pickets, and you can define how narrow each of those geometries should be, and we are using a spline in order to set up that fence. What's always nice about using MCGs and picking external geometry is that it's still linked up to that geometry. So we could go back into the posts down there and start to do a little bit of modeling, if you will, right? So I'm doing a little bit of scale, or selecting the upper area of that fence. You can start scaling stuff or modeling stuff out, right? There's not beautiful modeling, but you get the idea, right? Right. There's so much more MCG modifiers. So I want to give you some context on how to use it. Here are some examples on how to use or basically drive your extrusion amounts by painting in soft selections. So that's something that you could do easily. And this is another little example. So just imagine you have something like this, a torus, and you want to do a little bit of parametric modeling. Well, not parametric, but yeah, I guess you could call it parametric in a way, in a sense. So what I'm doing here is I'm selecting the two different smoothing groups of that torus. And instead of then doing some added poly functionalities on top, I'm using an MCG modifier, which basically lets me extrude or inset my selection. So I'm using even two to do different operations on top of each other. And this now is topology independent because I'm using my selection set and I'm using modifiers. I can now go back into the torus topology at any point, see that, and change the segmentation of the torus. So there we go. Which is pretty, or can be very useful depending on your workflow, really. But the truth is, you have to wrap your head around that kind of workflow a little bit and basically plan ahead. So in that case, you could as well go back into the extrusion modifiers, and instead of doing that kind of inset, we could pull stuff out and create a whole new layout of my geometry, right? And then I thought a little bit about, well, we could use those smoothing groups, but what if we had a different way of selecting stuff? And the sample pack provides you with a little tool that's called Select Poly by Pattern. And this allows you to type in a number sequence to basically select every other face, like every second face, every third face, every fifth face, doesn't matter. And you can use that in the conjunction or in relation with the modifier stack in order to build out your geometry, like that guy down here. Same thing. It's a select by pattern using a little bit of face extrusion, and there you go, right? So those are just some examples. Another example would be, the simple fact that MCG now supports bullet physics as well. And you can drive rigid bodies with it. You can drive spline systems with it. So here we got MCG being used as a quick layouting tool for, let's say, ropes or wires or some sort of spline pathing, really, on your landscape. There are obviously other spline tools as well, like this one is building supports between two different surfaces, and those supports can be animated as well. So there's a little bit of a tension that you can animate, and you can create a whole bunch of very, very decent effects with that. This one is one big spline object, and instead of doing a little bit of path constraint magic in order to animate stuff along those splines, all we can do here, or what we're doing here, is using an MCG that's crowding those splines with geometry like teapots, which is always good. It's always good luck to have teapots in your scene, so that's one tip for free for 3ds Max workflows. So is anyone using real-time engines like Unity, Unreal, I don't know, even Stingray or CryEngine? Like anyone? Or is anyone looking into VR workflows? Because one big thing when you're working in games and then you want to use these MCGs, the drawback has always been that MCG tends to create a whole bunch of new geometry, like one lump of new geometry, instead of reusing what is in your scene. Like if you're in a game environment, you want to instantiate your object. So instead of having, I don't know, 1,000 unique shelves, what you really want to do is 1,000 times the same geometry at different locations, right? So that's what MCG is capable of doing as well. And these are some examples that we've created for game workflows. If you're interested in those MCGs that I'm showing now, let me know. I'm providing my email address in the end, so you can drop me a message and I can send you those MCGs. No problem, right? All right, so here I'm just conforming the spline as we saw with a crab. Nothing new there, but this one is new, right? So this is an MCG chainer, and it allows you to select external geometry, like with the fence object that we saw. But the difference here is that it's reusing those, different fence elements, and it's allowing you to, in the end, bake it down back to instances. So all I'm doing right now is just offsetting everything a little bit, nudging it together, making it just a little bit of just a better fit, I guess. And also, obviously, as it's non-destructive and in a way procedurally generating those offsets, we can change the landscape and we can change the splines at any point, and everything will be set up and put into place accordingly. Now, this is still one big object right now. So if you wanted to have individual objects, which is more easily digestible by game engines, or even other, think of it if you wanted to use V-Ray proxies, for example, right? So in that case, you could have 6 different V-Ray proxies, which will end up making this this fence. So now I've baked everything down, and it's using those instances, which again could be proxies, could be geometry that you can output into your game engine. Yay! So I really like that kind of stuff. And here are some other examples. I don't know if is anyone remembering that lighting system that we put into 3ds Max a while ago? It's called Radiosity. So it's part of the Scanline offering, but it's in the advanced lighting, right? And what's nice about using Radiosity is that it allows you to bake down GI solutions into vertex colors. Why is that good? Well, vertex colors can be picked up and used to store all sorts of information, and they basically come for free in a sense, right? So what I've done here is I've baked down the GI for the landscape, and I'm using those grayish areas in order to scatter additional objects on my landscape without occluding the already existing ones, right? Because I've baked down my radiosity. It now knows where the houses, where those trees are, and I can, based on a vertex color, I can scatter my stuff around on that landscape. So if that is too fancy, like you can't really use that in your mind, keep in mind that you can, with the same modifier, you can pick different colors. So, and we have MCG modifiers that allow you, for example, to draw a spline on the landscape, and you can colorize your vertex colors based on that spline. So you get to find where a pathway or a street would be on your landscape. And we can use that exact same MCG to put trees evenly, like an LA, is that a word? Put trees on the sides of that street. Just an example. Cool. And then finally, this is another quick example. So, and this is really something, if you think about design visualization scenes, if you do interior renderings, and it's the same for basically doing believable games, creating those worlds can be very cumbersome in terms of just placing props in your scene. we always advocate that you can download or purchase Evermotion libraries or asset libraries, basically. Um, but you still have to place those assets in your scene, right? So MCG can assist you with that. So here I have a bunch of props right there, which I'm making part of one MCG, and I have these gray boxes, and these gray boxes are predefined basically volumes that tell that MCG tool. Um, it tells it where it's allowed to scatter geometry. Okay. So if I add these volumes to my scene, I now have that shelf being filled up with all these different props on the right-hand side. And that could be my kitchen table. That could be, by all we know, that could be a city layout that is being used to scatter, or where we use that MCG to scatter some buildings. And then in the end, obviously you can bake that back down. It's going to be individual objects once again, which is great for maintaining your assets, right? So that could be an external reference, and another artist, another colleague could continue working on those assets. Or in that case, I'm just showing you that you can now put a modifier on one of these parts, and because they are instances, they are instances with different scale, different rotation, and different position, but they're still the same, using the same geometry. That way we can easily adjust the overall outcome and basically art direct our scene much more easily. All right, so that was MCG. So I know it's not affecting everyone, but in the end, it's down to using tools versus creating those tools. And creating those tools has always been a smaller percentage of the 3ds Max user base, but using them could be potentially anyone who's using 3ds Max 2016 and up, because 2016 was the first version of MCG. Well, and some of those modifiers will only work in 2017 or 2018, but nevertheless, that's what it comes down to. Any questions? Are you still with me? I'm hoping I hope I don't talk too fast or go too fast. We're already 20 minutes in, but I guess we'll just carry on. So this is a quick example of the quad chamfer, which I'm not sure everyone is aware of. That's something we added to 3ds Max 2016, and we did some tweaks to it in 2018. So here I'm using quad chamfer as a modifier. It is in the edit poly as well. But if you have a quick look here at that connection, I know I'm trying to wiggle my mouse. Those are now quads. They're not triangles. Nevertheless, they are very small quads, so sometimes you don't want to have that kind of intersection. So if you have more than 2 segments joining at one vertex, you can click that quad intersection. And let me do that again. So you basically click that little checkbox, and it will allow you to continue that nice and neat edge flow and continue your modeling process. So that's just a quick tip along the way about the quad chamfering. All right. And then also there are 2 different ways of doing booleans, and one is under the old boolean tab. This is where we have hidden the boolean, the calf boolean library, which is much more non-destructive than the old booleans used to be. And there's a little tip. So what I've done here is I created a reference out of my boolean. And the reason I've done that, or I'm doing it right now, the reason I've done that is I want to show you that you can access the boolean information as a spline. Okay, so in order to do that, all you need to do is, well, create that reference and add an added spline modifier on top. And now that we have the spline, we can add a sweep modifier, for example, in order to create a little bit of third-party geometry. Does that make sense? And it's still non-destructive in the meanings that they can go back into the boolean and change stuff around. And once again, because we have splines, we can also use that in order to scatter geometry or create displace tubes to create some sort of weld seams, right? And here I'm using an MCG to clone along that specific curve and make those bolts, line up evenly along my Boolean operation. So because I'm from Germany, we always try to make things very, very tight, I guess. We have all these bolts now, all these bolt nuts, so it's going to be very, very safe and secure. But that's stupid, right? But yeah, if there are too many bolts for you, you can just go back into this MCG and say I only want to have 4 or 5. But that's my tip for the Booleans along the way. Cool. So other non-destructive booleans from Max 2018, they are not. They've been added into 3's Max 2017. So you should be able to basically use that straight out of the box in 2017. You will never know that there are new booleans because they are under the old boolean tab, right? So if you don't know about it, you would never click that because everyone else is using the pro booleans. But yeah, those non-destructive booleans are in 2017 and 2018. All right, so the data channel modifier, which is it's a beast. It's really, for some it's a black box. People don't know what it does, but basically it allows you to read any kind of geometry data, internal and externally, and you can modify those data sets, like an edge angle, for example, or a curvature or a tension. You can modify that by adding a different set of process operators, and then you can output that process back into positions or vertex colors, all sorts of stuff. So it's basically, as you can see here, there's the operator stack. The data channel modifier basically contains another modifier stack. So it's a modifier stack in the modifier stack. Oh my God. Which, as soon as you will see those examples, will explain itself, and it will show itself as a very versatile, like truly versatile tool that can be used in any market segment. So, for example, here we're using, and this is just a quick teaser. This is not the videos I'm going to show you in the end, but we're using an external node influence, and that's going to be that helper object, and the helper object it's driving the it's basically driving our soft vertex selection. And then on top of that, we have another modifier doing the displacement, right? So depending on where that node was, you would actually get more or less displacement right there. And here we're using the curvature in order to create a little bit of a dirt map for this armchair. This is driving, again, it's using basically volume selects with a particle flow. You could do that. So this is driving vertex positions, obviously, but you could drive vertex colors in order to create a wet map, for example, as well. This is an example where we show you decay. So this could be footprints in the snow or any other thing. All right. So once again, I just want to show you how it's, in theory, how it's done, right? So this is a data channel modifier. And we have a node influence, which is basically, it allows us to pick that external node. And I have another MCG that is splitting my polygons on this sphere. And then all I'm doing here is I'm going to transform my elements so I can basically based on the distance of that external node, of that helper object, I can now drive the scaling of my face positions, basically, or I can drive the rotation, all sorts of stuff, right? So this is very interactive. It's pretty cool, and as I said, you can drive rotations as well. Do something like that. So very versatile. This is showing that's a video done by Cheng Su, one of our community members. He's using a text plus object, a 3D text, in order to drive volume select, and then a bunch of volume or data channel modifiers or operands that allow to do that kind of, mocraf effect with it. So that's that. All right. So this is a little bit more of a practical example here on how you can use the data channel modifier for box modeling. So this is a very simplistic, I would say, like very traditional box model layout. Here you have an added poly, you have a symmetry modifier, and then on top of that you have a smoothing operator, which in that case is going to be Pixar's OpenSubdiv technology. So we're using the OpenSubdiv modifier. And I don't know how many people know that, but the OpenSubdiv modifier allows you, if you have a look at this guy, I don't know if you see that. So this is my PowerPoint clicker, right? It has different curves, and basically what the OpenSubdiv would allow you to do is define crease amounts for each of these edges, and you can literally control how much of a curvature should appear when you put that smoothing on. Does that make sense? So otherwise, if you wanted to have a hard surface, you would always go onto the edge and do a little bit of chamfering there. So the turbo smoother OpenSubdiv won't, smooth it all the way around. But with the crease sets, you have more control. And guess what? The data channel modifier can manage those crease sets for you, right? So what we have here is basically, I'm not even sure, I believe we're using a preset for that even. So the data channel modifier has a bunch of presets that you can use out of the box. One of that is the auto edge crease weights, which I'm going to load in here. And this basically, it reads an edge input, which is your edge angle, and it allows you to remap that edge angle to a specific crease amount, right? So here I'm outputting that through the crease weights. And if I go into my curve control and I change my curves a little bit, pay attention to the curvature of the car, because it's going to snap into place a little, like very, very fast. So I change that, and each time I change or remap my edge angles to a crease set, let's do that again. Every time I do that, it's going to change the amount of the smoothing groups. So how this could be beneficial is that, because the data channel modifier can always be active, you can use that in order to continue your modeling. So doing a little bit of layouting here, as soon as we lower the edge angle, as you can see here, it's going to smooth that those faces all the way around, because we've defined it so with the crease sets. Traditionally, those hard edges would not be possible without defining the crease sets, right? So that's what the data channel modifier does for you automatically. All right, are you still with me? Are you good? Is there anything that you find interesting out of that? Hopefully. As I said, this is a big mashup of different workflows that I put together for today. So let's have a look at this one. Of course. Okay, amazing. So this one is using a blend material, and we are driving the blend material with a vertex color. And basically, we're creating that vertex color map channel with the data channel modifier, which is reading the curvature and outputting it as vertex colors once again. So that means on all these edges, you get a wear off effect, or some sort of a dirt map-ish, right? So here we're using it as a wear off effect, which is coupled with a noise map in my material editor, in the material editor. And this was very fast, but what I try to show you here is that if you change the topology, because the data channel modifier picks up on the existing geometry, you don't have to redo those vertex colors. The data channel modifier does it for you automatically. So if you re-render that scene, you get that wear-off effect being put into place automatically, right, on those edges. So, and this is render agnostic, right? This can be done in Corona or V-Ray or Arnold, as we see here. So anyone could input vertex colors in order to blend stuff together, which is good. It's okay? Okay, nice. All right, and then finally, I didn't get an answer of any one of you who, like, when I ask about is anyone using real-time engines, so I'm just assuming no one does from the people who can chat, so I'm keeping this very brief. This is an example of using vertex colors in order to define foliage animation, so how leaves should bend and that kind of stuff. This traditionally is something that require you to paint in vertex colors. And with the data channel modifier, we can speed up that process drastically. So here for palm trees, for example, if I scroll down here, we're using the same effects that we already saw. So we're using a curvature in order to find the to find the outbounds of those leaves, because they are bended. That curvature works pretty well. And we're using an X and Y vertex input in order to find the center of those leaves. So the center of those leaves should basically settle the leaves that they shouldn't be able to bend at the center of where they're connected to the trunk. Is that making any sense? So where they are not connected, we have less of that coloring, meaning they can bend more up and down, right? And then in the end, we're just randomizing all these colors in order to drive a time offset. So every leaf would bend in the wind a little bit differently. And then I don't know if you heard, but since last week, we're shipping Stingray within 3ds Max. Well, not within, but as part of 3ds Max. So anyone who's using 3ds Max can download Stingray for free. It's now branded as Max Interactive, but in the box is basically Stingray. And that's what I'm doing here. So I have Stingray open up on the right-hand side. And with my Max Interactive or Stingray menu, I can send over that palm tree. And you will see that you get better shading effects, etc., as soon as you send that over. And we have this little bit of a, blending. I believe I have the wrong transparency set, but you get the idea, right? So those vertex colors are basically driving the animation of these leaves for you. So. And that's almost it for data channel modifier. Here's one more. Remember, we had those particles deforming the landscape, and I said we could use that in order to build up wet maps. Yeah, this is exactly what we do here. So these wet maps could basically drive your roughness amount on a V-Ray material or Arnold shader, or that doesn't really matter. And with the decay, it would fade in from being like a wet map back to a normal roughness amount. Or here we're using again an external node in order to define where north would be, and on the north side of that rooftop, we would assume that there's less sun shining in there, so potentially this still could be wet after rain, or it would have a different roughness amount because, again, the sun didn't dry out that wood that heavily. So the data channel modifier can help you with setting up those vertex colors, and then you can just use them in your shaders or even render materials. All right, cool. So we have roughly 20 more minutes to go. So I want to keep going, and I want to make sure that we have a little bit of Q&A time in the end. But again, if you have questions about any of the stuff that you see here, please let me know in the chat. So yeah, that's that. That was the MCG, or this is another example of using MCG in conjunction with the data channel modifier. So we are using the DCM to define colors. And remember where I've scattered stuff on a landscape based on the radiosity amounts. That's the same idea here. So we are just picking the green color amount based on the data channel modifier output, and we're using that green color vertex color, those green vertex colors, in order to scatter trees on the landscape. So it's a very, very versatile tool, as I said. So, blended box map. Is anyone familiar with the idea of what blended box map does? Because it's not a revolutionary idea. The technique has been around for a while, but we have now a very good implementation within 3ds Max, which is super simple to use and very easy to set up and maintain. And the idea is basically like if you have landscape stuff that you don't want to unwrap, but you want to have a proper texture projection onto these, or you have a hard surface model like this. This is where perfect, Okay, so this is where the blended box map would come in very handy, because it allows you, without any UVs, to project textures from up to 6 sides, right? So top, bottom, left, right, etc., onto your geometry, and then you define the amount of blending that's going to happen between those different textures. Even more so, this is a little tip here. So I'm locking my projection to a current frame. This is not on by default. This is something you would have to keep in mind. So if you have a hard surface model like this, which where you want to use blend box map in order to project onto different elements that might occlude each other, like my PowerPoint presenter once again. If I wanted to paint the battery, right? Can you see that? Yeah, absolutely. I would need in 3ds Max, I would need to take the batteries out, put them side by side, lock that to that frame. Could be frame -1 or frame 1, or I don't know. And in the next frame, I would put it back together. But I'm going to use the frame where I've put these side by side in order to project my blend box map on. That's what's happening here. It's like spray painting it like a toy, basically, right? So. And then as soon as you're good to go, you're rendering a projection template, which you could then load into Photoshop or Paint, or basically your Paint application. And that's what we've done here. So there we go. And that's all it needs, really. It doesn't have to be accurate, because at the end we're blending those textures back together, and you just have to pick one if you load those textures back in. As you can see here, they are named _back, _bottom, and 3ds Max will pick up those automatically and fill those into the specific channels. And there you go. You got a very neat spray painted model without the use of any UV unwrap modifiers. So this can be done out of the box. Even for game processes, this is a nice tool for quickly layouting your textures. Just see if something works, and after that you can start defining your UVs and texture bake that blended box map back to your UV layout. Yeah, and this is where I guess it comes from, right? If you have stuff like rocks, which are very painful to unwrap hand by hand, because you have a big variation of different rocks, and you don't want to unwrap all those. Blend box map helps you with that as well. So here we are projecting on 16 different individual objects at the same time, and you can randomize different stuff like positions and but obviously also rotations. And so here I'm randomizing X, Y, Z in rotation. If I render that again, we have a good variation. And if we just change those 3 textures that we're using here into a stone or moss or whatever material you want to project onto these, you will have a very good outcome without using any UVs. So that's great. Now, if you want to use UVs, or if you had to use UVs for whatever reason, maybe you want to use Substance Painter and you want to, paint your stuff out. That's where UVs are kind of necessary. And this is a game example provided by CD Projekt Red from The Witcher 3, which basically shows you a little bit of the UV unwrap workflows. So first of all, you have the same selection tools as an edit poly, right? So you can shift select different faces. You can do a symmetrical selection on both sides, even with asymmetrical faces. So there's a little bit of a threshold there. You can do double clicks in order to quickly select edge loops. All of that is kind of practical, so that's good. So I did a little bit of a peel there in order to detach those elements. So, but this is a new one. So new in the meanings that this is new in 2017 and up. So you can activate a peel mode and use that with a point-to-point selection. And that point-to-point selection is basically there. It gives you that orange preview, and it goes from HA to HB and travels the path, the shortest path, and it's going to create the seams where it's going to cut open those UV clusters. And you can undo that as well. So if you hold on the Alt key, it will weld stuff back together. And on the left-hand side, you'll see it's doing the unwrap as we are creating those seams, right? So you get immediate feedback about what your how your UVs will be behaving based on where you create the seams, which is a way better and more intuitive way of working with UV unwrap than it used to be, right? And there are different ways of actually visualizing your tensions, like an angle distortion, area distortion. You can display that in the viewport as well as in here. You can use brushes to tweak your UVs. You can paint in a relax brush, for example, into different areas like that. And that's another little tip. You can isolate selections inside of the UVs. So I'm holding here. Okay. There you go. So I'm selecting the mouth area and I hit isolate right now. And this is going to isolate my whole selection in the viewport as well, which again enables you to go back into that peel mode, do your point-to-points peeling, which is really great. And there has been a ton of stability fixes for the UV unwrap between 2017 and 2018, because 2017 introduced all these new technologies and new changes. It also, unfortunately, introduced a bunch of instabilities. So in 2018, this is now back to normal and back to being very usable and straightforward. And then finally, the packing might not be something that you really have a focus on for render workflows, because render workflows, you can bump up 8K textures or 16K textures, but as soon as you want to output something in a more optimized way into real-time engines or even into your render pipeline, you want to have a good UV packing. And the packing originally, like, I don't know, Martin, you said your 3ds Max 2018, so you would have access to those two packing algorithms, recursive packing and linear packing. The non-convex one is the new default in Max 2017-2018, but I'm going to show you the old one, so without rotate clusters and fill holes for now. This is the starting point 3ds Max would give you, and I guess a couple of years ago we would go like, okay, yeah, it's a starting point, right? So I can start tweaking my UVs from there. But in reality, it is kind of painful to do the tweaking manually, especially if you think about, you upscale some of those geometry or some of those UV clusters, you immediately lose the relation of texture resolution between maybe the chest and the boots. This is something the packing would take care of for you. However, what you can do now is you can just go straight to the non-convex packing. This gives you, like, that's a real starting point right there. And if you switch on rotate clusters, fill holes, you will see that it actually tries to really, squeeze out every every centimeter on your UV space, if that makes sense. Cool. Wow. Okay, so that was the UV unwrap. Skinning animation. We don't have much more time. Well, is anyone doing character animation here? Otherwise, I'll just speed on a little bit. So I just wanted to make you aware of some tweaks to the skinning workflow. So if you ever use skinning, those three new changes will really save tons of time. So this is the skin modifier, and you would traditionally have to go into your skin weights, your weight tables, paint in your weightings in order to make that hand behave correctly. So instead of that, I'm just adding a heat map solver on top. You do perfect, Evko. Okay. So the heat map solving can be done outside of the stance pose, so you can apply that heat mapping at any position in your animation in order to check if something is okay or not. And what I'm showing you here is that the weighting for the fingers is okay, but it kind of offsetted these two glove elements, so they're out of place right there. So the integration of geodesic voxel scanning and heat map binding, or the other way around. Anyways, in 3ds Max is so nice that you can actually apply it on a vertex selection only. So here I'm sparing out those paths. I'm just doing it on the outer edge of the glove stuff and the fingers, and then I'm using the mirroring in order to get from the right hand over to the left hand. And finally, obviously, geodesic voxel binding is something that you can do as well. So here I have another skin modifier that hasn't been tweaked at all. So this is something that we can do with the geodesic voxel solver. It's a single click. It's very, very fast. And it's using a resolution. It's basically voxelizing your geometry. So if you have more details that you need to perceive and to wait out, then you can select those details and go into a higher resolution just for that space. And because it allows you to select stuff, other than, I guess, other implementations and other software packages for heat map solving, geodesic voxel binding, you can mix those up here. So think of Gerald, being one character instead of different props. You could still do heat map there, geodesic voxel on the feet, and maybe traditional weight table binding on the chest, right? So you have really full control with that kind of skinning algorithm. And finally, if you look at this little horse here, so this is on purpose a very bad skin job. But I wanted to show you, once again, just one more example of the versatility, well, two more, of the versatility of the data channel modifier. So here we have the delta mushing integrated into 3ds Max, and it's basically, it's capturing the rest pose of that horse, and it's trying to project that original rest pose on the whole animation. And the mushing amount is basically a smoothing amount that allows you to define the strength of that smoothing that takes place, right? So these are the iterations right there. So sometimes that can be too smooth, like you see here, right? So it's getting more and more like a rubber leg. But you can drive that with masks. So you can use vertex colors in order to mask out different areas on this horse. And this allows me to go back into the delta mush modifier and say I want to mask my area here. Now I'm using two delta mushing modifiers, one for the whole horse and one for just the legs, which again allows me to drive different iterations for different body parts. Is that good? I think it's pretty good. All right. And this is one, I don't know, the sound might be a little bit off-putting, but Clovis Gay from Hocus Pocus, he provided us with rigs from this little production here, which were all done in 3ds Max, and we have this Interior rig, which I want to show you very quickly. So here we have a little bit of a face rig going, and if I wanted to add additional detail, well, for sure I can use additional morph targets and paint in different curvature, etc. But I could also just be happy with the rig and add a data channel modifier, which allows me to read the tensions, like how much of an edge would be squashed or stretched. And based on those tensions, I can then drive additional morph targets, or in that case, I'm just adding a little bit of a push-pull amount that gives me additional wrinkles across my face. See that before and after. This is all based on those tensions, and because it's a data channel modifier which is put at the very end of my modifier stack. In that case, I could make that only happen at render time, right? So it doesn't slow down your viewport that way, and you can be sure that if you render, you get additional geometry deformation, like additional details. And this is just, as you can see down there, instead of using the push amount to drive in like push and pull deformations, I'm driving the strength of how much morph targets should be used in this in these areas. Okay, cool, nice. So that is that, and we are almost out of time, but I want to show you one quick thing. This is in the curve editor. We have buffer curves now in 3ds Max 2017, 2018. Also, performance has been greatly improved. There have been removed, we've removed a lot of bottlenecks for animation and viewport performance overall. And with the buffer curves, you can more easily tweak your curves inside of the curve editor, especially if you know about these monster key tools that are now implemented into 3ds Max. So these are all these new little tools there. And this is my little tip there. Those keys or those icons have transformation keys. So if you hold down the shift key, it will actually do something else. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's added functionality. But with the buffer cursor, you can easily go back and forth between your tweaks and the original animation. And at some point, you will go like, okay, that's it. And you can just bake that down to be the new buffer curve, basically. And then finally, thinking about animation, and this is all character stuff right now, but this could be technical animation as well. We have tons of people who do mechanical rigs inside of 3ds Max, and having something like this really, really speeds up your workflows when you do animations. And what I'm showing you here is the newly added motion paths, which basically allow you to edit keyframes directly on the trajectory. Trying to speak faster here because I know we're out of time, but and it has different settings, like you can select multiple keyframes. You can edit the ease in, ease out effects by just tweaking the Bezier handles. You can trim the path to only display 10 frames back and forth, like ghosting effect for motion paths. You have path coloring, so it shows you the velocity between the different keyframes, etc. Right? So it's pretty good. Good addition for animation and stuff. So that's that. All right, so a bunch of core stuff, and maybe I can go into 3ds Max for just a moment. So what you see here is the new user interface, which is now more and more Qt driven. So we have a whole new docking system, which allows you to even do this kind of panel stuff here, like a scene explorer next to the command panel. I can track this in here. I can stack my scene explorer there. So this is really resolution independent as well. If you're working on a 4K screen, you can use the Windows text scale settings in order to scale, scale your text amount up and down. Here I have the timeline on top of your UI. All of that would not have been possible without the implementation of Qt, and everything can be driven with workspaces as well, right? So you can go into 3ds Max and store different workspaces for animation and modeling, etc. Okay, modeling performance. I have to jump through these. If you have questions about specific stuff, let me know. But rest assured, performance is a big one. Scripting is a big one as well. So the Python integration in 3ds Max 2017-2018 is a whole new one. We talked to people like Crytek and ILM and others who are maintaining custom tools across different platforms, and Python is just the way to go because we're basically supporting the same Python library as Houdini or Maya or Motion Builder. And with the addition of Qt and PySide, you can basically build up your plugin and use that out of the box. In fact, I do have a plugin here, a third-party plugin. This is a very clever mesh reduction tool. It's called Instalot, but it uses the same UI as the plugin for Maya. It's exactly the same, right? So it's again, it's very easy to maintain those different tools across different software packages. And then finally, this is one video. I know I'm really running out of time. Just bear with me 4 more minutes, okay? If that's okay with you. So the asset library is something that you can download for free. Anyone can. It's compatible to 2016, 3ds Max 2016 and up. It allows you to access different online resources, but also network folders, local storages. You can basically just drag locations into your asset library and create collections, and you have a tagging system in there. And what I'm showing you here is that this boombox, for example, is missing 3 dependencies. So this could be textures in that case, right? It could be MCGs. And instead of opening 3ds Max and going through every of these in Max files step by step, I can just point it to a new folder structure and will automatically scan through all the subfolders and relink the dependencies. And you can do that on multiple Max files at once without even having Max open up. And the asset library itself, again, it's a standalone. It doesn't eat up a Max license, right? So that's kind of great. Here I'm using a little bit of tagging. So I could say this is my clothing, but it's women dress and stuff like that. And we have filters that allow you to quickly search for an asset that is below 10,000 polygons, for example, right? Sometimes you just have that polygon count, the maximum polygon count that you're allowed to store in your scene, and the asset library is enabling you to filter for that. It's also having a lot of these drag and drop abilities. So here I'm replacing my current selection in the scene. I'm just drag and dropping new geometry in, right? So same here, just selecting something, drag and dropping that in, bam. So that whole replace stuff, it's pretty fun to work with in conjunction with the asset library. It also allows you to use it in object paint and external reference. And this is one final tip. That's not new to 3ds Max. It's in, I believe it's been in there since 3ds Max 2016. The object select in place. And what a lot of people still don't know is that you can do a right click on that icon, and it gives you additional parameters like use the bounding box as a pivot or auto parent stuff. So if I move things over onto that table with the auto parenting on, it will automatically create a hierarchy between these objects. So now if I move that table, everything stays in place, right? So that's pretty cool. All right. Oh my God. So we didn't talk about a whole lot of stuff. I don't know if anyone's doing 3D printing, but there's a Print Studio connection between 3ds Max and Print Studio. But most importantly, I guess since last week, we are shipping Max Interactive, which again is basically Stingray. And this allows you to send over your 3ds Max scenes with basically, if you wish, even a single click. So here I'm connecting my scene to that Stingray technology, to Max Interactive, and it's sending everything over, and it allows you to do virtual or VR experiences. VR or no, that could be something that you can use with headset. That's with headsets, head-mounted displays, or you can just simply output as an exe file on your Windows desktop that you can use in order to drive around in your scene, or you can output to mobile devices, etc. Right? So if you would want to see more about that, I guess you would currently need to Google for Stingray or search for Max Interactive. If you're interested, we can do another webinar on how to use Stingray and Max Interactive in conjunction with 3ds Max. So, because there's so much more happening. So much more possible, really. All right. And then finally, well, there is Arnold shipping with 3ds Max. I don't know if anyone's using Mentoray. I don't know. Maybe you can type in your renderer into the chat. A lot of people these days are using 3ds, are using V-Ray. More and more Corona I see, and well, unfortunately, less and less Mentoray really. Oh, there's Corona. There we go. Perfect. So that's super fine. It's just Arnold is part of the Mentoray Iray art. Very good. Okay. Arnold is part of the Autodesk group now, so the developers Solid Angle are with Autodesk since last year, and just a year after, we're now shipping with Arnold inside of 3ds Max. It is going to be maintained by the Solid Angle team, so we all move on. It's, well, trying to keep the 3ds Max as render agnostic as possible, so we're still in close touch with the guys at Corona, at Chaos Group, F-Storm, you know, all those others who are shipping render engines for 3ds Max. I guess all I need to show you and talk to you about is the memory efficiency of Arnold. So if you ever come across a scene that just doesn't render with your current renderer, maybe it's a good time to give Arnold a shot. It is easy to download and get started. But I don't want to push you on that, right? So that's super fine. And for those who want to use Mentoray and Iray inside of 3ds Max 2018, you can download that from the NVIDIA website for free, right? The only drawback is that if you are using batch rendering, which traditionally ship with, I believe, 5 batch render nodes for 3ds Max, that is now gone. So when you download that from NVIDIA, you will, with 3ds Max 2018, it's gone. 2017 is still there. So if you want to continue rendering with Mentoray in 2018, you will have kind of node-locked render experiences, right? Okay, so let me hop out of that PowerPoint and basically quickly go all the way down here, giving you a summary. Oh God. There we go. Okay. So I talked a little bit about the user interface, definitely, and we saw these little tips about the quad chamfer and the boolean. Remember, the calf boolean library gives you access to spline information as well. Blended box mapping and UV unwrap, different workflows, but both overhauled. The UV unwrap is much faster, so it's now GPU accelerated. That's something I didn't mention. Datachannel modifier. If you didn't know what it does and what it was there for before this webinar, hopefully now you know. And just again, give it a try. It's heat map. No, it's preset driven, so you can just use it, put a bunch of presets in there, and be good to go. Skinning additions, the curve editor, asset library, MCGs. There's so much stuff happening at the moment. But again, if you want to see more specific webinars in the future, let me know. If you have questions, this is your chance. Also, obviously, you can contact me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I assume also on via email. So it's just my name, alex.horst@autodesk.com. All right. So and then my